This is one of the biggest interviews on NDTV World. Israeli former Prime Minister Mr. Olmert joins us live to talk more about how things are shaping up as far as a ceasefire is concerned. Yes, there is a potential ceasefire for exchange of 10 hostages, but what's the long-term plan? Mr. Olmert joins me to talk on that. Sir, thank you so much. Let me first start by asking you that there is a ceasefire on the table. In your assessment, do you think it's going to stick the 60-day out?
Well, I must say that I know as much as you know. You know, we all hear what is being said or quoted by the participants. Prime Minister Netanyahu and the President both say that they are hopeful that there will be an agreement. So let's hope. I hope that there will be an agreement. In Israel, the majority of people want that there will be an agreement, and that this agreement will not be as it seems to be proposed right now, but rather a comprehensive agreement for the end of the war and the return of all the hostages in one phase. But I'm not certain that this is the plan. I think they're talking more about 10 Israeli hostages that will be returned at this point. So, and a ceasefire for 60 days, within which negotiations will carry on for a permanent ceasefire. So I think it's still doubtful.
While there's some sort of a pact has been reached, what about the main sticky points on both sides? On Israel, it is the fact that it wants to end and completely eliminate Hamas. And on the Hamas side, of course, it wants that Israel should be completely vacated out of the Gaza Strip. How do you see those sticky points going forward?
Of course, Israel will not end the war unless the necessary arrangements being made to make sure that Hamas will not carry on further any dominant position in Gaza. Of course, the Hamas will not release all the hostages, which is the only asset they still hold, unless it will be guaranteed that the war was finished. So I think that while there are negotiations for partial understandings, there is still a disagreement about the final terms, which is from the Palestinian side, Hamas side, the end of the war completely and eventual withdrawal of Israel from all of Gaza. And from the Israeli point of view, the total elimination of Hamas as a dominant force in Gaza. Mm-hmm. This is still very much, I think, is debated, and I don't see yet signs that there is any progress towards an understanding about these two fundamental opposing issues.
President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have had multiple rounds of talks. There have been disagreements. They've actually broken down. What we have right now is a very limited window of cessation of hostilities. Do you think that the two sides will be able to have some sort of a meeting of minds here, some sort of an agreement on how things look going forward?
Well, one of the most difficult questions, which is kindly discussed in everywhere, and I talk to many of the networks across the world, is what is President Trump prepared to do, and to what extent he's ready to use his enormous influence on the Israeli Prime Minister to try and force him to accept the desire of President Trump to end the war completely and to bring some kind of an agreement that will guarantee that it will not return into kind of hostilities and exchanges which are now very much dominant in the scene. It's hard to say. I wish I could be an analyzer of President Trump, but who can? Who can understand exactly what President Trump is up for? I trust him that he wants to bring an end to the war, and I absolutely trust him that he wants all the Israeli hostages to be returned as soon as possible. Question is he capable of exerting that kind of pressure? I think he can. is does he have the kind of authority and power to try and force Prime Minister Netanyahu to abide by his demands? I think he can. Question is whether he is at this stage prepared to do it, or he will be somewhat patient to let it go for another few days, perhaps another few weeks. That remains to be seen. I can't answer that.
Right. Mr. Olmert, this is one of the biggest international stories happening, a war that has been going on since October 2023. Expectation that this could probably end as far as the moment Donald Trump came into power. That hasn't been the case. But in your assessments, do you think that Donald Trump will now exercise his political capital over Benjamin Netanyahu to get a final deal going?
I hope so. As far as I'm concerned, he should have done it already long ago. I must say something which I hope you are aware of. There is a growing expectation in Israel, I'd say more than expectation, a demand in Israel for the end of the war. The statements made by the Israeli Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense about the building up a humanitarian city in Rafah and bringing 600,000 Palestinians into that region, and the statements made that Israel will expand military efforts in Khan Yunis and Beit Hanun, in some of these still centers where Hamas still possess some kind of military power, are not accepted in Israel. The majority of Israelis want the war to end today. They want the hostages to end today. So looking at it from the perspective of President Trump, I think he has got the moral support of most of the Israelis to exercise his authority and force the Israeli Prime Minister to abide by his demands. And therefore the question is, what is he up for? What does President Trump want to do? What he thinks, I think that he can do it. Question is whether he thinks that he can do it. Remains to be seen.
In your assessment, how long do you think it will take for this entire conflict to actually end? Given the fact that Israelis have actually been worn down since the Hamas attack started. They've just been in a chain reaction of assault after assault, but at the same time, an endless war that's going on.
I think, look, the most important thing is we have to be realistic. The Israeli military achievement is outstanding. After more than 20 months, maybe 21 months already of war, we have achieved almost all that can be achieved in a military operation against terrorist organizations hiding in tunnels in a center, in the midst of an urban center, embedded with lots of civilians not involved in terror. We have destroyed most of the tunnels. We have eliminated most of the leaders of Hamas. Yahya Sinwar, Muhammad Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, Muhammad Deif, all of these prominent military and political leaders of Hamas were eliminated. Most of the command positions were eliminated. Most of the launchers of missiles were eliminated. Most of the rockets were eliminated. But also, more than 60,000 Palestinians were killed. Certainly, some of them are terrorists and they deserve their punishment. But quite a few of them are not. And there are thousands of Palestinian children that pay this terrible price for the war which started by Hamas. And at this point, I think what is required is a realistic, balanced understanding of how much further should it go without any specific military objective which is realistically achievable and doable. The majority of Israelis, that includes most of the chief of staff of the former Israeli armies, most of the major generals and commanders of former Israeli army, and the head of Hamas, Mossad, and the head of the Israeli Secret Service. And even I understand that the present chief of staff in the deliberations of the Israeli cabinet say that at this point now it is more important to bring back the hostages rather than to continue what appears to be a war without a specific objective that can be achieved. So, as I said before, I think we have done a great deal. I think we have almost completely eradicated and destroyed the military capacity of Hamas. No one seriously can now argue that Hamas still poses any significant threat to the state of Israel. And therefore, I think it's about time that the war will end. And this is what most of the Israelis, who are all patriotic and obviously are anxious to demise Hamas and to destroy them, but also understand that at this point, the continuing of this military operation is not worth the cost of possibly losing the lives of so many soldiers and the 50 Israeli hostages which are still held by the Hamas.
Mr. Olmert, then let me ask you this question, something that the Trump administration, the Trump himself has spoken about several times, which is his vision of rebuilding Gaza Trump style. How do you see that? Some people say it's absolutely unacceptable. There are those who feel that maybe there is hope. How do you view this in terms of how Donald Trump feels that the entire Gaza Strip could become the French Riviera of the Middle East?
I think that the vision for the day after will not allow, and I'm not in favor of deportation of Palestinians from Gaza. Gaza is Palestinian, and Palestinians live in Gaza, and they ought to live in Gaza. Question is, what do we do in order to make sure that Gaza will not be controlled in the future by terrorist organizations? And that's the essence of what the Israeli military effort was focused on, to destroy the military capacity. And now the arrangements which can be sponsored and facilitated by President Trump and the American administration in cooperation with the Palestinian Authority, Jordan and Egypt and the Emirates and Bahrain and the Saudis ought to be how to establish the presence of a security force in Gaza that will prevent the Hamas from becoming again any significant force in that region. That's what we need to do. Ending the war, bringing the hostages, releasing Palestinian prisoners as part of an agreement, and also trying to establish a security force that will prevent that at any time in the future Gaza will continue to be what it was, which is a basis of terror.
Okay, let me then ask you about Prime Minister Netanyahu. There are a lot of talk about the fact that this is continuing because his political interest and his political future is tied to the conflict continuing for long. As an opposition leader, how do you read that?
I'm sure that you know that I'm a staunch oppositioner of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu today is still holding a technical majority in parliament with the members that were elected almost 3 years ago. It does not reflect the mood and the attitude of the majority of Israelis at this point. I think the majority of the Israelis are sick and tired, are disappointed, and are not supportive of Netanyahu. In all the polls which were run in Israel, almost on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, more than 60% of the Israelis say that they do not trust Netanyahu and do not support him. So I think there is a different voice coming from Israel, a voice of compassion, a voice of compromise, a voice of tolerance, and a voice of a desire for ending the hostilities and establishing a basis for political cooperation with the Palestinians for a resolution of the historical conflict. And Netanyahu is certainly not someone that can be part of it. He will have to go down, and he will go down, and I hope he will go down soon.
Mr. Ehud Olmert, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to NDTV on what is one of the biggest international stories, which is a possible ceasefire, paving the way for some sort of a long-term solution between Israel and Hamas. On that note, viewers, I'm going to slip into a very short break. Come back on the other side with more stories on India. And stay with us.